Well, welcome everyone to Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. I'm your host, Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, developing your own financial profile, part one in our series on retiring right with media personality and financial consultant, Alex Joyce. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks, Steve.
Alex, you are a major player in the Midwest. You are a great planner, and I noticed that you do some things that most planners don't do, and that is, when we want to build a financial profile for our clients.
Sure.
Everybody should have one, but we don't. So one of the things you like to talk about is a risk tolerance test. I know it's not science, but it's a really good indication of possible future behavior. Talk to me about why this is important.
Sure. Steve, I think that when people get in and they start really looking for a financial advisor, what they really start to look at is the emotional aspect. I mean, everybody wants their money to grow, right? But the thing is, they really don't consider if it doesn't, or if it doesn't necessarily keep up with inflation, or if it starts to go backwards, as we saw last year. It's difficult. So I think that if someone really starts to be honest with themselves and consider their money going backwards or negative, how much are they really willing to lose? I think that's one of the key points that we bring out in our practice is looking at the color of money, really going through a true risk analysis, asking of the appropriate questions from an approach. If you invested $500,000, how would you feel if that money went to $250,000, or if it went up to $600,000? Just to kind of give us an indication of growth, risk versus reward, Steve.
I've noticed that the consumer is uptight right now. If you're a boomer and you're sitting there from born 46 to 64, you're feeling the pain of 2018, as if we forgot what 2008 was about.
Right.
So when I'm talking about risk and I'm getting close to retirement, just the timeline shortens my ability to stay in the market. It makes me feel uptight.
I agree. We look at and we try to have the conversation of the reward in terms of looking at the risk-free rate, right? Looking at a 90-day T-bill of being, let's say, looking at inflation. And if we look at the risk they're willing to take as opposed to what treasuries are paying, what's the reward for being a little bit more aggressive, right? So I think that it's difficult, really, to just kind of pinpoint where somebody, it's the herd mentality, if you will. Everybody, like I said, wants to grow their money.
Sure.
But I think that the first thing they have to do is be honest with themselves and just kind of sit down. We have to have an open conversation. And if they want to become more risky, or if they want to grow their money at the speed of lightning, we have to just kind of really slow them down as an advisor.
I've noticed a propensity between men and women that if I have a woman take my risk tolerance test against her husband's, I'll notice that her risk tolerance is reflective of her 401k.
Sure.
His is not so much. He's much more aggressive on the test than he is, or in the holdings than he is on the test.
I agree.
Now, how do we have such a disconnect sometimes, especially with men?
Yeah.
We have a disconnect. We're pontificating, we're bloviating at the office on how much we're making, but our test tells me that I'm conservative.
It's a difficult question, to be honest with you, because I see that every day as well, right? Where the woman, I think, is more conservative, right? I think a lot of times, just out of nature, maybe they're more geared in terms of knowing the expenses, maybe knowing what the future holds in terms of what they can afford, or maybe they're doing the budget, maybe they're doing the balancing, and so they're less likely to want to take risks because they're comfortable where they are, and they're maybe a little bit more frugal. Where the man, and I can only speak for myself, right? But the man just happens to be a little bit more aggressive, and they want to just take charge, and they want to they like I said, the herd mentality. Their point of interest is in growth, right? And I see it, like you said, where the woman just kind of slows down, is more realistic about the opportunity ahead, and maybe they're just more frugal and more conservative, if you will, by nature.
I want to ask you a question about your generation. Do you think millennials at large, watching what their baby boomer parents have went through, are they starting to become a little conservative?
That's a difficult question. I think that myself, right, being a millennial, if you will, I'm looking at, for instance, what my father kind of went through, right? He was a Chrysler, a GMer, and at the time where he was just at the prime of his career and seeing things kind of go backwards in that manufacturing Chrysler atmosphere, if you will, where his 401k was kind of taken by storm. And so me looking at that from the age I was then, it does have a little bit more conservative behavior in my mentality towards investing. My peers would probably agree, where they've seen some of their, some of their parents kind of go through that financial catastrophe, if you would. And so, but I think that there's the other end where we're in the tech era. And so, we look at some of the technology out there, and it's hard to just be more conservative because you kind of want to jump on that because it works in the speed of lightning.
Well, you got some time here. I mean, you're talking about millennials.
It's
You
a
got
time
25,
horizon.
30 years out.
It's true.
Yeah. When I'm looking at risk tolerance, I do the test. And if you write me at steve@lifesizesolutions.com, we'll send you the test. Alex will grade it for you. His shop will tell you what it is. When I'm looking at the test results, it shows conservative, then it goes kind of conservative moderate, then moderate, aggressive, and then aggressive. So it'll kind of block you out into categories.
Yeah.
And that helps you kind of read the heart and the mindset of the client.
It does. We like to look at money. I mentioned the colors, right? Green money being that more conservative, no money, if you will. Then we kind of get into yellow, which is the money that you tend to be a little bit more aggressive with. And there's red. Red is the money that, hey, you know what? If I lose it, I don't lose sleep overnight, although a lot of us would. But we just kind of categorize that in simple ways so people can kind of understand mentally what risk truly looks like. In terms of colors, if you will.
Well, talking about conservative, I just noticed that the fixed rate annuity crossed over the 4% mark. Now, that's a big bellwether for conservative people. They go, hey, 4%, I don't know if I'm knocking that out with dividends off my stocks or my interest rate. I don't know if I'm pulling 4%. So 5-year lock, that could be a way to go because it's conservative. Now, when we talk about risk, now here's why I say this.
Okay.
I did this test one time, and the guy says, well, wait a minute, let me get this straight. My test tells me that I want a 15% return, but to do that, I might need to expose my portfolio to a 20% loss. Why does that not sound right?
Yeah, it doesn't, right? But that's the type of risk that you have to be aware of that you're taking, if not more, for it to kind of come back, right? It's the volatility, right? It's the swing of how the market's going to come up and how it's going to go down. Like you said, I mean, we haven't seen a year like we did last year, 2018, in a while. People kind of panicked. I heard it best. It was an article I read, and the gentleman said, stock's the only thing that people don't buy when they're on sale. So it's very difficult, that frame of mind. But again, if people are chasing those high returns, they have to be willing to take that type of risk, Dave.
I'm looking at beta risk, I went on Morningstar and I started loading. I took my client's portfolio and I loaded it up, put it right in there. It gave me a number. Here's your risk. Here's your beta risk. And so it was 1.74, which is high. So I looked at him. He's 57 years old. I said, here is what you have. This is like going to a gentleman who's been having problems at night, urination, and he has to get a PSA test, right? And I say, your PSA is kind of high. And he goes, well, I feel great. I know, but it's high. We need to get it checked out. I just saw your portfolio. Are you really that kind of a risk taker? So when you put math to this, I put a beta risk number in front of him. All of a sudden he was like, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not as I thought I was conservative. I guess I'm not.
It's true. You speak Morningstar, right? Because it's an indicator of how the portfolio is performing against the benchmark, right? Everybody wants alpha. Everybody wants to be ahead of the benchmark, if you will. But you have to look at the beta and how much beta risk you're truly taking, which is equivalent to the movement of the market. So when we use Morningstar in our practice, and we show people compared to the benchmark or compared to where they're trying to go, the risk involved in that road, and it's a great tool. So I 100% agree with you. 1.7 is relatively high if you got somebody that's relatively conservative.
Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this segment is the estimating your timeline. Now, in your case, millennials, you're 25, 30 years out. Okay.
Sure.
Some generation X and Y, shorter. Boomers, you are on the precipice, right? I mean, you're right on the outside. So when I'm looking, the shorter the timeline, I've noticed that the most good planners, including your own practice, they start to get conservative. They force a line of thinking down their client's mindset. Say, hey, listen, your time isn't enough to make this cycle again. So talk a little bit about time.
It is, right? When we have baby boomer clients, and our clients are, right? So I would probably say, Steve, that our average client's 64, 65 years old. And off subject, if you will, but I looked at that when I first originally started my practice as a challenge, but now it's truly not, because I think that our older clients embrace that, us being there for their generations and generations to come. But we still, in our practice, try to get our clients to understand the rule of 100. right? Take your age, subtract it from the rule of 100. That's the percentage of that you should have in equities, if you will. 120 now, I believe, is what the appropriate number, just like the rule of 4% now, probably closer to 5. But we try to get our clients to understand, truly, if they've won, there's no sense, if they've won and they're crossing the finish line, there's no sense to take more risk.
Right.
You've already won. So I think that we try to get them to preserve the majority of their capital, but still try to keep up with inflation, Steve. I think that's extremely important. If they do want to become a little bit more in terms of risk, right? Try to chase a little bit. We just kind of maybe carve out a portion of the portfolio, maybe designed for that, designed for him, where she's saying, well, we just kind of want to preserve and make sure that our ends are met, make sure that the bills are taken care of. We can take the grandkids to Disney and things of that nature, right? The American dream. But we just want to make sure that we would design that portfolio in a way where it's not cookie cutter, but it's truly there for the client. They understand it. We can review it. We can analyze it. We can come back to it. We can reflect. So that's what's most important to us.
Well, don't forget to watch our next segment on determining financial product costs, part 2 in our series on retiring right. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, and of course your financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.